enjoys the benefits of an oil-free offshore marine ecosystem because we've had a moratorium in place since the 1970s in the wake of the Exxon Valdez. Now, the provincial government and more recently the new federal minister of the natural resources have wanted to open up exploration in these waters and have been holding federal hearings to look at the scientific review of this process. Now, a lot of people have been unhappy with this, but most recently, industry has been showing a little bit of impatience with the process, typified by Brian Peckford's recent resignation from his oil consortium.
The approach presently being taken is sort of dysfunctional. That it should be more coordinated between the First Nations, the province, and the federal government. And right now we have some hearings going on which are just federally inspired. And this is not a way to get something like this going, because it's going to take all three of those parties if it's going to have a chance of succeed.
What Peckford's talking about is the failure to resolve Aboriginal land title in places like the Haida Gwaii area, which covers a vast area from here, from Haida Gwaii, right into the Hecate Strait, which is also the area of most interest to the oil and gas industry. Now, the recent Haida case at the Supreme Court agreed that there is a legal obligation to consult and accommodate Haida interests.
The court has said that the province is under an obligation to consult in order to accommodate the Aboriginal title of the Haida people in decisions it makes.
Would that include the offshore? Because this government seems to be quite, wants to move very quickly when it comes to offshore drilling and issues like that.
Well, it definitely includes the offshore in the claim, but also there's established fishing rights, so that and the case law has already established that where there's fishing rights, there's the capacity to protect the environment. So the offshore issues are already engaged.
First Nations should be consulted before anything is started. Even the first set of hearings should not be held until the First Nations are involved, and they should help drive what the process is rather than bring them in after the process has started, for example.
I would agree with Brian Peckford on the fact that negotiations and consultation and discussions with First Nations should be paramount, because they have rights and title to this area, and especially the Haida Nation and the Tsimshian are deeply concerned, as are the other coastal nations along the whole of Hecate Strait and Queen Charlotte Sound.
Brian Peckford, ex-chair of the Pacific Offshore Energy Association, is also known as the man who opened up the East Coast to a dubious oil and gas industry and also helped shut down the cod industry on Newfoundland. So one wonders what his credentials are for being an expert on the BC coast and economic development.
Brian Peckford just came to BC, and all he's done is promote oil and gas. But I think if we look at his record in Newfoundland, it isn't the bonanza that he told everybody that it would be. And they've got severe economic hardships in Newfoundland now, and Hibernia is now going downhill. It's not going to go on very much longer. And so there are issues there.
There's an economic and financial imperative here. BC is a have-not province. Started this about 2 years ago. They're going to be getting over $800 million in equalization payments in this coming year from Ottawa. And I think a lot of British Columbians, knowing that we do have some potential offshore, do it safely, do it environmentally responsibly, but do it so that we can regain our have status and not be a have-not like many of the other provinces.
Well, I think, whoever is going around talking about jobs in relation to that thing is misleading people. That's not really the issue. They're not talking. Anybody who's interested in getting that oil out of the money isn't concerned about the interest of people.
Well, this is a sort of a greenfield project. So there's no baggage on this project, and it's a great opportunity for all people involved in this issue to get together and do it right this time.
It's interesting right now with Brian Peckford resigning, and what is he going to do now? And is somebody else going to pay him to be an advocate for the industry? I don't know.
The final questions of the likelihood of oil and gas on the coast are being raised by industry itself, and here's what they've been saying for a long time now.
Even if the government were to proceed, there are issues relating, as we talked about earlier, the environmental assessment review issues, the First Nation issues, which will take some time. And then the normal cycle of industry activity tends to happen in numbers of years. The Hibernia offshore oil project, which started producing 2 years ago, was found in the early 1970s.
there is no federal provincial regulatory regime in place. So there's no certainty for oil companies to put money in and know what's going to come out of it in the long run.
This is an industry that looks, 5, 10, 20, 30 years into the future. From an industry point of view, we're looking to government to make up their minds in terms of how they would like to see that unfold. And until those policy decisions are made, industry is really not in a position to respond.
We're not opposed to resource development. What we want is resource development that's sustainable and ecologically responsible. We haven't got that now. We've got to change things to make that happen. The issues around why there was a moratorium on oil and gas in the Hecate Strait haven't changed. All those issues are still with us today.
I think it's a long way down the road before we're going to see any real oil and gas production on the BC coast. I hope it's a forever scenario. There are a tremendous number of environmental risks, and all studies show that if there's an oil spill or any problems, and there always are some oil spills, that the winds will blow them onshore, and they could contaminate a lot of our magnificent coastline.